Our guests on this music industry forum are Casandra Faulconer and Charlie Dennard. They're both active professional musicians, and we talk about staying healthy on the road, corporate music making, and running off to join the circus. Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to talk about making music in corporate spaces and other spaces. My guests are Casandra Faulconer, who's a fabulous bass player. She's toured with Cowboy Mouth and spent the last 5 years on a Cirque du Soleil show. And then Charlie Dennard, was it six? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to short credit you. Charlie Dennard plays piano and organ, and he's spent 13 of the last 18 years on Cirque du Soleil shows. And they both also do lots of other interesting things. And full disclosure, I have played many enjoyable jazz gigs and other gigs with Cass and Charlie, maybe separately and together over the years. So let's talk about the circus first, since y'all have that in common. So Cass, you played bass, Charlie, you played piano. You each did some band leader things on the circus. What are the skills you need as a musician to go be successful on the circus gig?
Cass, you want to go first?
Okay, the skills you need. Well, first of all, just having already done such a wide variety of gigs in my life, from, I started playing in bar rooms with my dad, and I went to a music college in Toronto at Humber College, and I played big bands, I could read charts, I could, I'm definitely a performer. I didn't go through the composition route or the arranging route, which I have some regrets. So musicians out there. Also, so I really feel like I can cover a lot of ground. So being in a situation like that, I wasn't afraid. I can really take a lot of whatever's going to be thrown at me. But that gig, and you can attest, Charlie, it's unlike any other gig. Because even though it is live, you're working with tracks, there is no music when you're reading it. You're just dealing with in-ears, and you're dealing with the band leader making the calls. So there's just so many different elements. My show is cooler, I think, in a way than a lot of the other Cirque shows, because our band was actually featured a lot on stage, so we got to go out there more often than I think other Cirque shows, which was cool. But it was just weird for me because I was in a pit, but yet I couldn't hear the audience. It wasn't like doing a big rock show or being in an intimate jazz room space or.
Right, you didn't get that audience feedback. Like other things.
And I had these super tight ears too, so I didn't get that feeling, especially when you're calling too, right? Like I'm not even thinking about the audience when I'm calling. I'm just thinking about the act.
So to clarify for our listeners, calling is what the band leader does, which is like progress the band through the show. So maybe I didn't give enough context. Cirque du Soleil is a traveling circus with a live band and lots of like acrobats and clowns and stuff. It's a sort of modern circus. So you're supporting the circus. So how important was being able to read on the gig?
I think it's better as a band leader because you have to do charts, right? Sometimes you have to do stuff on the fly. But I worked with people who are not readers, but I think all of us could.
But you could maybe not sit down and sight read, but if you gave somebody a written thing, they could figure out what it was.
And would only be for rehearsal purposes. We would never have music in the pit on stage.
Right.
So you would just have to get that together.
Charlie, what do you have to add to that? What were the skills that mattered for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to do a gig on that level, you definitely need a certain, level of skill and education. I mean, just to be able to do it. I mean, because you have to do a lot of different things. Reading definitely helps you to learn the music. And as a band leader, I did have to do charts for everyone, for starters, so we could learn it all. It just made the process a lot faster. But But we had a musician who really didn't read, but he had like almost perfect pitch and could hear something once and, you know, pretty much nail it. And once you learn the material, like there's about 20 tunes or something, you know, that's what you're doing. You're playing those. So, but for me, actually, it was more about who you can deal with and who you can be friends with. And I mean, that's how I got the gig.
I was going to get to all of that, but let's dive in on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of people, I mean, I'm not going to say a lot, but musically speaking, there's a lot of people who could have no problem playing a gig like that. I mean, even though it is a lot of music and you cover a lot of territory, like Cass says, it's like world fusion, electronic, jazz, you know, a little bit of everything. But I mean, I basically got hired because I was friends with the guys and the composers and whatnot, you know. So, I mean, I'm just being honest.
I think our main connection is the same person for the circus in general, though, right, Charlie? Is the percussionist or percussionist friend?
Yeah, originally, yes. But like the last gig I did, the composers like saw some. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
you, as you had been working for them, got to know some of the composers.
Right.
So this last show you were on, you started that show when it was new, and the composers were like, "We want Charlie."
Yeah, I think the composers were the same for both of our last shows, right, Cass? Yeah.
Really great. Those guys are great. They're awesome.
Super awesome. Yeah. And we just clicked, and like, and honestly, like the band, it was much more important when you're doing a gig like that. You're doing 10 shows a week on average, you know, 300 plus shows a year. We were doing 400 plus in Vegas when I did
How to dig music.
You've got to be able to get along. That's more important than like how virtuosic or how whatever you are. If you're just are easy to deal with and show up on time and do your job, like that means so much more than, you know, you being this like amazing musician, because there's a lot of amazing musicians out there, but not a lot of them, unfortunately, can you know, sit on
live with and
every
deal
day.
with every day. Yeah. Well, so, and the interesting thing, because I know I had this on the cruise ship. I mean, I'll just, for context, Cass and I first met working for Carnival Cruise Lines, like sometime late last century. And I was a band leader for them for about 3 years. And I would have a band, but even though I was the band leader, I didn't get to pick the musicians. Like, people would show up, and you had to figure out how to make the thing work with whoever the office sent you. So I imagine it's the same thing on the circus. Like, you don't get hired as a unit. You hire a bass player and a piano player and a drummer.
And a lot of the people that I played with throughout the years are not necessarily people I would have ever had a musical connection to, probably otherwise. Right. In language and in just like our culture too, which is cool. You get that, but sometimes again, it's like, oh man, I wish someone knew what a second line was.
But it probably really didn't have much relevance on that.
No relevance.
Yeah.
The Chinese acrobats didn't do second line music in their show.
Exactly.
What other skills did you need? Other like tech skills for this job? I know as band leaders there was some Ableton Live stuff in there. Charlie, tell us a little bit about like that aspect of the thing.
So yeah, that Ableton was like a huge part of the gig, and of course, from a keyboard player's perspective, you really needed to know like your equipment and stuff like that really well, because you were asked sometimes to come up with sounds, or you know, you really needed to be able to troubleshoot, especially when the rig was having problems, because it's a very high-tech gig. And Ableton, I had a year or two of experience with Ableton before I really dove in. But see, when I started with the Cirque back in 2002, we were still using sequences from a floppy drive on a keyboard that was running MIDI, you know. Mm-hmm. So we kind of evolved through.
Did you all have recorded backups, or when a musician was out, the part was out?
No.
Okay.
Actually, there was on one of the keyboards, there was a MIDI track. There was like a general MIDI sound of an accordion or something. That was just horrible, but basically, no, someone else would have to cover, or, we would do without. But people you just didn't miss the gig, like whether you were sick or not, like you were. That was old school. Now, of course, everybody's backed up in Ableton, and you just unmute the track basically, and you kind of have to adjust, obviously, because the track is the track. It's not as flexible, if you have to improvise and whatnot. But yeah, the Ableton, but Ableton is a very unique program that will do a lot of things, but at the Circuit kind of does a very specific thing. So once you kind of get your head into what it does and what you're asking it to do and what you want it to do, it's pretty straightforward. Like everything is set up open-ended on these vamps and loop, and you think in one a lot or two, so no matter what the time signature is, you're kind of like at any point in time you can just turn on a dime. So
so what you're doing mostly is just cueing the next scene, whatever the next,
or going back if you have to repeat something. It's pretty much, the show is in a linear fashion in Ableton where you could go top to bottom, but the show changes and you have back to backs.
Set the show up before the show starts to know who's out, what acts are modified, and everything has a different scenario. So before the show starts, you have to set the show up.
Yeah. So you'd have like shortcuts on the keyboard that's controlling Ableton, for example, but sometimes during a show something would go wrong and you'd have to skip up ahead. So you just really had to know where you're going and be able to sort of on the fly make those adjustments, because unlike Broadway, where really the people on stage follow the music, their dance routine or their song, it's the opposite. In the Cirque, the musicians are following the act on the stage. So when they finish their trick, you cadence or transition or hit or whatever. So
yeah, I remember even on the cruise ship, following the juggler and getting the cue for when Manny hit the boxes.
Exactly.
That was an inside joke for Cass. Before we move away from talking about the circus stuff, what are some other jobs that music industry trained people might do there? Like obviously y'all had audio engineers. Were there production kind of people, stage managers, those sorts of things? Did you carry people like ticket people and front of house people with you, or did they hire those locally? Tell me what you know about that aspect of the thing, because we have obviously students listening to this who are more production side or event people or whatever.
There was more production than there were artists. So the people performing on stage, including the musicians, we were considered artists, and everyone else was technical, pretty much, right? I guess in the actual show. So there's riggers and automation and stage management and audio and lighting and carpenters, and how many more people am I missing, Charlie?
You also had the front of house people. You had the publicist. You had the tour company manager. The
plumber. The cook.
So would the publicist travel with the show?
Yes.
Wow, that's cool. I figured that would be somebody at the office in Montreal.
It's both. I mean, it's a huge thing. So,
or here, she's in connection with the office, but yeah, she's the one who's on the ground getting all the events together when we go from country to country, city to city.
Yeah.
Cool. So
yeah.
What countries and cities did you visit? Cass, you go first.
Not nearly as many as Charlie. So much catching up to do.
I might have to edit out some of Charlie's if it gets too long.
Well, my tour basically, most tours, they always start in Montreal and they go through North America. I didn't join until the end of North America, the first round. So I did a few cities here in the States, and then we went over to Europe for 2 years, and then we went over to South America. We're supposed to go to Asia. It was tough for our show because our show was the theme, like every show has a theme. It was women. We were an island of powerful women. We had very few men.
So it was like the Wonder Woman circus. It was the Amazons.
Kind of, but it was a rock band. We were like,
yeah.
we were cool.
And it was an all-woman band on your show, correct?
Yeah. No. And Asia just couldn't get down with that. The market was like Japan, who loves Cirque. They were like, there's just too many women. You know? So we never really got to do that market, and they sent us back to the States for a year. And we were still meant to go to Hong Kong and finish out there, and then Corona hit.
That was spring of 2020, and we'll say no more about that.
Ended, yeah.
Yeah. Charlie, where all did you get to go?
Yeah, it's the same. Most of the tours they all start in Montreal, and you do a couple of years in North America, including Mexico. And so I did the same. I did that a couple of times. So I've spent several years touring all of North America, obviously. And then
how many times did you do the Royal Albert Hall?
5, I think. Yeah.
More than Eric Clapton.
That's funny. I was just watching Eric Clapton at the Royal Albert Hall on the Cream reunion video the other night. Yeah.
Crazy building, that place.
Yeah.
I went to a Kronos Quartet concert there.
Wow.
That
nice.
was super cool. It was
that would have been a highlight.
Yeah.
But like Cass said, you typically spend 2 years in each sort of region. So 2 years in Europe. I did a couple of those. So I spent about 4 years there. A couple of years in Asia. Me was just Japan and like Australia, New Zealand. And then a bit of time in South America. Yeah. So those are kind of like the main
And when you say like 2 years in Europe, you weren't working every night. Like there would be some time where there was a couple weeks off where you could come home or go to Istanbul or do whatever you wanted, right?
Yeah, the transfers, depending on how far each city is from each other, you generally have about a week to 10 days on average, sometimes 2 weeks. So yeah, I would come back home. Like from Europe, it's not that bad. I could get a direct flight from New Orleans. I mean, at the time, you could fly direct to London or Frankfurt. And so that was pretty easy. It's about an 8-hour flight. But
And then you did a show that was in Vegas for a while, too.
Yeah.
That was a stationary show,
right? Yeah, a couple years, yeah.
What was the Vegas?
Charlie?
What was the Vegas scene like?
Cirque, bruh.
I mean, Vegas, like, honestly, I got called to go out there to sort of help out a bad situation that, it wasn't like a lot of people dream about going to Vegas and retiring there or what, I never kind of had that, but I went out to help out and I ended up staying for 2 years. I probably could have stayed for longer, but I just, it's not New Orleans. And I found, it's a very livable city. It's cheap. You find your people and your places. I mean, Vegas, there's a huge artist community because there's so many shows out there. I have a lot of respect for that place after spending 2 years there. And, but it just wasn't for me. I kept my place here. I was coming back, regularly. And I kind of went there just to help out for a while. And so once I sort of did what I was asked to do, I decided not to stay and came back. So, but I mean, it's a lot of people give Vegas a bad name, but I wouldn't, honestly. Like I could go there and fall right back into going to my favorite places and hooking up with, I got a lot of friends there. We all do. Like,
did you get to do other music making while you were there?
Yeah, a little bit, because a lot of people, like I had a buddy I went to college with that would organize these tribute shows at the House of Blues. So we would do those regularly with like other musicians and singers and people from the Strip who were off on that particular night. And so that was always a lot of fun. But
that's cool about a permanent show.
Yeah.
than a touring show, because a touring show is just, it's hard to
Yeah,
get
you
up.
have like your 6 weeks and then you go to a different city or whatever. Or even if it's 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. We have a lot of old cruise ship friends end up in Vegas somehow. I mean, because cruise ships do try to essentially be like Vegas on water, you know, with the dancers with the big feathers and things.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was playing a show. It was like a Motown review show with Louisiana Philharmonic a few years ago, and I looked at all the charts and realized they were all arranged by a guy who had played in my cruise ship band like 15 years before that. It was Joe Escriba. Yeah.
I knew it. Yeah.
And so he had been in my band, and then I left and he became a band leader, and then he moved to Vegas, and now he's like apparently doing horn arrangements for pretty much everybody in Las Vegas.
Wow.
He's
He was in my band. He was just learning. He was just a little baby. Just
well, he was never that little. He was always a tall dude. But yes, he was very, very, very young when I worked with him. But it's funny how these worlds overlap, and you end up like.
I don't know if
running
you
into
guys
people.
know, but I did cruise ships back when I was in college in Miami.
Who'd you work for? I feel like
I
everybody
worked
that
for-
went to Miami did a cruise ship at least one summer.
Yeah, exactly. So I worked, they call it the Big Red Boat. It was a premier cruise line out of Canaveral that pretty much just did the Bahamas and the Abaco Islands. You know,
What was the band? Was it a show band?
the house band, yeah. So it was nice. It was like an 8-piece band, like several horns, and we did everything from the captain's cocktail stuff to like you said, backing up the jugglers and the magicians and
Yep.
yeah. It was
We had, when Cass and I were out there, it was an 11-piece band. It was 4 saxes, 3 trumpets, trombone,
Wow.
piano, bass, drums.
I love those Nestico charts, man. That was
nice.
Yeah, we would play these Sammy Nestico charts, but just without the missing parts. So we had like the whole Basie Straight Ahead record, but with just like 1 trombone and 3 trumpets.
Wow.
And I'm like trying to sound like 4 trombones. It was, I learned a lot on that gig. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I think a lot like the circus, it was also not about the music. Like we were totally there in support of this other thing.
Right.
On the cruise ship, we were there in support of this sort of like pseudo Vegas experience of, oh, look, there's the band and the tuxedos and the dancing people and the, and we would do the play-ons and the playoffs with the comedians and all the, all that shtick. And it was cool. The weird thing about the cruise ship was it was a little hard to have any sort of other artistic outlet because you lived on a boat. Right. We would sometimes have jam sessions. I one time had a very cool cruise director that would let us put on like jazz shows. He would let one of the midnight shows be essentially the band, just like turn the back lounge into a jazz club. But that didn't happen very often.
And also, Jeff, those are in the days when you couldn't do a little home recording on your computer. We didn't have a computer. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have all those things where you can go back to your cabin and you can actually, if you're
right. I'm sure people are making records on cruise ships now.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask, like, how does doing these like sort of corporate things influence your, what I will call art music, which isn't to say that what we do in these corporate settings isn't art, but we have things that we do in support of some other thing to get paid. And then we have things that we do because it's the music we want to make. Charlie, I know you've like made at least a record or 2 jazz piano record, over the course of being out. Sort of how did you balance those things? And I know Cass would gig a lot, home on break and go play with Papa Molly or Lynn Jury or whoever it is you happen to be playing with, because Cass is the bass player, so she gets to play with everybody. That's how that works. But I just wonder if you had thoughts about like kind of trying to balance the having essentially a day job where you play and then getting to do the music making. That's kind of the reason we started doing these things.
Yeah, exactly. And that was honestly one of the best parts of, let's be honest, that gig, the Cirque gig where you're doing that many shows, 10 shows a week, like, you got one day off typically on a Monday and you're just so tired. All you can do is like wash clothes and find a grocery store or something, wherever you are in the world, and chill out at the hotel. But after you sort of like get into that rhythm, for me, having a creative outlet was really important. And like that, the corporate side of the gig that paid you the steady paycheck also gave me like, so during my free time, I could do things like put out an album of all original music, and sort of when I'd come home on a break for a week, go straight into the studio with some friends and knock out some stuff, because, and that sort of like would recharge my batteries, because yeah, we wouldn't get to jam. A lot of times, like Cass was saying, the band that you're working with is from all over the world, and no, there's very little common ground sometimes.
Jam too when you're all in ears and you're not in sync.
Exactly.
It's not this live, organic situation.
Yeah. So that's one really good benefit for me, that I was able to do that, because like now, for example, with the situation, you know, I don't have the money to to put out another record, you know, and it's like, because it costs money and it takes, you know, so there's definitely a trade-off. So yeah, but important. You have to do that. I mean, to me, that was, like I said, like it really helped give you some balance. And when I know Cass, when she was coming home on breaks, she would, like you said, play a bunch of gigs with anyone and everyone, because it just was like, oh, wow, I'm playing no in-ears,
yeah,
no click track.
I could play these three really funky chords all night, and it'll be great.
I admire you, Charlie, for like, you know, you actually like composed, created, made music during the
Well, you have to. It was necessary for me. Like I really couldn't have kept going. Yeah, without having that. Like
I struggle being out there too, because even when I would come back to New Orleans, the longer I was gone, the less I was in the scene, and you know, just like we start getting more and more in the periphery. It's like, and I can become almost like we don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that is a thing of, you know, like being on a scene. If you're freelancing, like people have to see you.
Yeah.
I
wonder if that's why they call it a scene. I'm
not sure. Network, you got to get out. The only way to get gigs, I don't think it's doing these live streams. It's like going to the Maple Leaf or going to whatever club and taking a drink and like hanging out and saying hi and I'm in town and let's do something. You know, that's vital.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, that's kind of throughout for me. Like, I don't know, Jeff, if you knew this either, but I was a music business major in college, my undergrad in Miami. And even though I was more of a musician, you know, I kind of did the business to satisfy my parents who were paying for my college. And I actually enjoyed learning about the publishing, distribution, copyright, all that. I mean, this was 30 years ago, you know, before we've had all these other issues come up in that realm. But I would have to say that most of my work and most of my friends people that I became friends with in college 30 years ago, everyone sort of helped each other get gigs. You know, it was all about like, oh, you know, so-and-so, oh yeah, well, like, and he's the director of whatever, or works at this studio, or works for this publishing company, or whatever. Like, it's all about networking. And I mean, you don't want to like be the networking, you know, like that's all you care about. But it is important that, and just to realize that the people you come in contact with and you deal with just on a day-to-day basis are probably these people that you're going to run into in the business later on, you know, 20 years from now.
I can totally trace almost every gig I've ever done back to someone I met in college.
Exactly.
Like 2 or 3 degrees of separation maybe. But.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you know so-and-so, yeah, you're friends with him, and then you're in. Like, you're automatically, like, that's your audition, basically. Like,
so we started talking about the art music thing, sort of hinting at kind of the mental health aspects of doing what we do. Cass, I know you like do yoga a lot. Charlie, I know you play tennis. I don't know if they serve the same purposes in each of your lives, but I was just going to ask you, like, as a working musician, what are other things that you do to sort of help you feel, I don't know, fulfilled, sane, whatever the right word is? And like, how does that fit in? Does your tennis playing or yoga practice influence your music making in some way, even if it's just a place to go to not think about music for a minute? Cass, you go first. You got the look. You were waiting to see if Charlie was going to talk.
I can take this. Well, it is just mental health. So that just is about your whole life, right? So I know I need to go outdoors and get air. So I would walk. And right now I am so, with Corona and now being in the house for 6 months and not going to a new city, living in a new city every 2 months, like that was a thrill for me to like walk my neighborhood, walk a city, every day and discover that. So that was amazing. And I still go out to the bayou every day, but it's the same walk pretty much I'm doing every day.
So you got to trade playing the same music every night and having different walks for getting to play different music, but having the same walk.
Oh my God, that's interesting. Yeah. And I also practice mindfulness. I've really, over the last 5 years, delved into that. And I would find throughout the world, there's different meditation centers. So I'd find these drop-ins, like it was me, like I had a drop-in center in Winnipeg and Manchester and London. It was more of the English-speaking places that I would find these really cool places to go and practice, Buddhism, meditation, whatever, So that was something that definitely helped me, because I would struggle a lot living with the same people, working with the same people. For me, that's that could be like cruise ships are like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cruise ships were definitely like that, because if you didn't find a group of friends, you couldn't go to a different bar to find new people to hang out with. There was one bar in town. It was the crew bar. That was it.
If you're in a rock band or whatever, you're with the same people all the time. So that can be, for me, it could be a beautiful thing. It's like family, but then your family can drive you crazy, right?
Yeah. Charlie, how's the tennis playing fit in? Does that sort of function in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, when I was touring so much, every city I would go to, I would hook up, like I would search on the internet, where's the best place to play, and contact the local pros and get hooked up. And 9 times out of 10, that would lead me to a whole nother social network. And I would end up, getting away from, like Cass said, working with the same people every day in the same office on the same gig. It really was important to me to have that outlet, to be able to do something else. And yeah, for me, tennis is like, people go to the gym and punch a bag, like, it really releases a lot of whatever. It's just good to sweat and, take your mind off. Like, it's funny, but there's a lot of similarities in sports and music. And I find with improvising, for example, and thinking about things and getting in their groove, like when people play tennis with me, they're like, man, you're like a metronome. Like, you just like, and I'm like, yeah, I honestly, like, I like to get into a groove and like stay there, it's just,
yeah, piano's part of the rhythm section too, man. Come on. That counts.
It's true. But there's a lot of, like, just as far as your natural energy and getting a sound on your instrument and having a good contact with, if you're playing a contact sport, like with, coordination, your motor skills, like, there's a lot of similarities. So yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I've played so much since I was a kid, and I can kind of have that as an outlet. I think we all need something, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the bar like too much, but
yeah,
whatever it takes, go like let off some steam, yeah.
When I was in undergrad, I remember Bill Huntington and John Hebert, who are both great bass players. I know y'all know who they are. I don't know if our
Yeah.
students do. Bill taught at Loyola, and John Aber was a student with me, who's like played with, Jazz Hall of Fame level people.
Yeah.
And they were talking about playing golf or something. And I remember saying, like, John, how do you have time to play golf? Like, shouldn't you be practicing? And because I was, snobby jazz major kid. And Bill kind of looked at me and he said, well, if you don't do anything else with your life, you don't have anything to make music about.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
Yeah.
like, always stuck with me in terms of, spiritual practice or sports or reading poetry or going to art museums or climbing mountains or whatever the thing is that people are into doing. Like, I feel like it's important that we have other things that aren't music so that the music has a place to be meaningful.
Most definitely.
Agree.
And I just set that up because I knew y'all both had other things you did. So I was helps to know your interview subjects. So let's wrap this thing up. I would like for each of you to tell me something you wish someone would have told you when you were in music school.
I just feel like I wish I did. I'm like a supportive musician. I don't feel like I am the artist. I'm not a composer. I just even, now that I'm playing more guitar, I play around with chords, but I'm still not I'm not writing songs. I'm definitely a supporter of artists. I feel like more, if that makes sense, and a collaborator.
Sure.
And I wish I had more skills in my bag with vocals, with other instruments, with technology. I mean, eat that stuff up, get as much knowledge and skill as you can, because the more you have, the more valuable you will be.
Yeah, because when we were in college in I'll just say the 90s to be broad, although a little bit of mine was in the 80s, there was a thing. You played an instrument and you were supposed to get really good at that. And then you went out and you did that thing. But I find now that so many of the people that we're seeing are doing more stuff. They're playing everything on their own record and then putting together a band to go out. Or the people in the band are I'm going to play bass on this song and I'm going to play guitar on that song. And then I'm going to sing background and do, that the expectations of versatility from musicians are greater now than when we were coming up, for sure. I think that's true. Charlie, what's your wish you would have learned in college?
Well, yeah, you're right. You always need to know as much as you can about as many different aspects of, everything, from the music business side to help you make some decisions with contracts or whatnot, or, and the performance side. But on the performance side, honestly, everyone needs a certain level of technical ability. You have to be able to play all of your scales and at certain tempos and know harmony and all that sort of stuff. But I wish someone would have clued me in a little bit earlier, or I wish there was more of an emphasis. I don't know today, but I think it's still true on developing your own personal thing, what you're good at and what speaks to you, and making that connection, as simple as it is, really being able to hear what you play and making this, as opposed to emphasizing, oh, you've got to learn giant steps in all 12 keys. And that is awesome. That's a great exercise. But really finding yourself musically and what your voice is and what you want to say musically, that takes a different approach. That comes from sitting down, carte blanche, improvising and hearing, transcribing and stuff like that. So it's a different thing. I just wish someone would have clued me into that a little bit earlier, because that is the most important thing to me at this point in my life, because it's anybody can, sort of play, what's expected of you, in music school or whatever. But as far as nurturing that uniqueness that you have, whatever it is, as simple or as complex as it can be, but like finding yourself, who you are, and like making that sort of forefront in the thing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of they don't teach that in school so much, or not enough emphasis is on that.
It's hard to teach
Yeah,
personality.
exactly.
It's easy to say, learn these chords, play this exercise, do that
Right.
thing.
Yeah,
And the personality is the stuff that will keep us working. If the world doesn't need any more trombone players, I might still be able to get something if somebody wants what I do.
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, when
Well,
we're young too, we're just trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out so much, even about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. How do you go about in nurturing that aspect of both?
Yeah.
Mindfulness. I'm telling you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cass, we have a number of faculty members who will love you forever for that last plug, because they're definitely on that team, and I support that. All right, that seems like a good point to hit stop on the record. Charlie, Cass, thank you so much.